The Vedic period or Vedic age c. 1500, c. 500 BCE was the period in Indian history during which the Vedas, the oldest scriptures of Hinduism, were composed. Note 1. During the early part of the Vedic period, the Indo-Aryans settled into northern India, bringing with them their specific religious traditions. The associated culture, sometimes referred to as Vedic civilization, note, was initially a tribal, pastoral society centered in the northwestern parts of the Indian subcontinent. It spread after 1200 BCE to the Ganges Plain, as it was shaped by increasing settled agriculture, a hierarchy of social classes, and the emergence of monarchical, state-level polities. 3. For scholars consider Vedic civilization to have been a composite of the Indo-Aryan and Harappan cultures. 5. The end of the Vedic period witnessed the rise of large, urbanized states as well as of Shramana movements including Jainism and Buddhism, which challenged the Vedic orthodoxy. 6. Around the beginning of the Common Era, the Vedic tradition formed one of the main constituents of the so-called Hindu synthesis. 7. Origin. See also Indo-European migrations, Indo-Aryan peoples, Indo-Aryan migration, and indigenous Aryans. The commonly proposed period of earlier Vedic age is dated back to 2nd millennium BCE. 8. After the collapse of the Indus Valley Civilization, which ended c. 1900 BCE, 9-10 groups of Indo-Aryan peoples migrated into northwestern India and started to inhabit the northern Indus Valley. 11. Note 3. Note 4 shows spread of IE languages show Indo-Aryan migration. The knowledge about the Aryans comes mostly from the Rigveda Samhita 24, which was composed between c. 1500 to 1200 BCE. 25. 26. 13. They brought with them their distinctive religious traditions and practices. 27. The Vedic beliefs and practices of the pre-classical era were closely related to the hypothesis Proto-Indo-European religion 28-29 and the Indo-Iranian religion. 30. According to Anthony, the Old Indic religion probably emerged among Indo-European immigrants in the contact zone between the Zarafshan River, present-day Uzbekistan, and present-day Iran. 31. It was a syncretic mixture of Old Central Asian and New Indo-European elements. 31. Which borrowed distinctive religious beliefs and practices. 32. From the Bactria margina culture. 32. At least 383 non-Indo-European words were borrowed from this culture, including the god Indra and the ritual drink Somo. 33. According to Anthony, many of the qualities of Indo-Iranian god of might/victory, Varitrana, were transferred to the adopted god Indra, who became the central deity of the developing Old Indic culture. Indra was the subject of 250 hymns, a quarter of the Rigveda. He was associated more than any other deity with Soma, a stimulant drug perhaps derived from ephedra, probably borrowed from the Bedouin religion. His rise to prominence was a peculiar trait of the Old Indic speakers. 13. These migrations may have been accompanied with violent clashes with the people who already inhabited this region. The Rig Veda contains accounts of conflicts between the Ardas and the Dasas and Dasyus. The Rig Veda describes Dasas and Dasyus as people who do not perform sacrifices akratu or obey the commandments of gods avrata. Their speech is described as amrigra, which could variously mean soft, uncouth, hostile, scornful or abusive. Other adjectives which describe their physical appearance are subject to many interpretations. However, many modern scholars connect the Dasas and Dasyus to Iranian tribes Dahab and Dahit and believe that Dasas and Dasyus were early Indo-Aryan immigrants who arrived into the subcontinent before the Vedic Aryans. 34-35 Internecine military conflicts between the various tribes of Vedic Aryans are also described in the Rig Veda. Most notable of such conflicts was the Battle of 10 Kings, which took place on the banks of the river Purushni, modern-day Ravi. Note 5. The battle was fought between the tribe Barabbas, led by their chief Sudas, against a confederation of 10 tribes: Puru, Yadu, Turbasha, Anu, Druhiru, Lena, Valanas, Paktha, Siva, Vishanan. 38 Barabbas lived around the upper regions of the river Saraswati, while Purus, their western neighbors, lived along the lower regions of Saraswati. The other tribes dwelt northwest of the Barabbas in the region of Punjab. 39 Division of the waters of Ravi could have been a reason for the war. 38 The confederation of tribes tried to inundate the Barabbas by opening the embankments of Ravi, yet Sudas emerged victorious in the Battle of 10 Kings. 40 Puru Kutsa, the chief of Purus, was killed in the battle and the Barabbas and the Purus merged into a new tribe Kuru after the war. 39 After the 12th century BCE, as the Rig Veda had taken its final form, The Vedic society transitioned from semi-nomadic life to settled agriculture. Vedic culture extended into the western Ganges Plain. 42 The Gangetic Plains had remained out of bounds to the Vedic tribes because of thick forest cover. After 1000 BCE, the use of iron axes and plows became widespread and the jungles could be cleared with ease. This enabled the Vedic Aryans to settle the western Gangetic Plains. 43 Many of the old tribes coalesced to form larger political units. 44 The Vedic religion was further developed when the Indo-Aryans migrated into the Ganges Plain after c. 1100 BCE and became settled farmers. 41 45 46 Further syncretizing with the native cultures of northern India. 47 In this period the Varna system emerged, state Kulka and Rotherman, which in this stage of Indian history were hierarchical order of estates which reflected a division of labor among various social classes. The Vedic period estates were three: Brahmin priests and warrior nobility were first, peasants and traders as second, and laborers and artisans belonging to indigenous non-Aryan people were third. 48 This was a period where agriculture, metal and commodity production as well trade greatly expanded. 48 And the Vedic era texts including the early Upanishads and many sutras important to later Hindu culture were completed. 49 The Kuru kingdom, the earliest Vedic state, was formed by a super tribe which joined several tribes in a new unit. To govern this state, Vedic hymns were collected and transcribed, and new rituals were developed, which formed the now orthodox Yasrauta rituals. 50 Two key figures in this process of the development of the Kuru state were the king Parikshit and his successor Janamejaya, transforming this realm into the dominant political and cultural power of northern Iron Age India. 41 The most famous of new religious sacrifices that arose in this period were the Ashvametha horse sacrifice. 51 This sacrifice involved setting the consecrated horse free to roam the kingdoms for a year. The horse was followed by a chosen band of warriors. The kingdoms and chiefdoms in which the horse wandered had to pay homage or prepare to battle the king to whom the horse belonged. This sacrifice put considerable pressure on interstate relations in this era. 51 This period saw also the beginning of the social stratification by the use of Varna, the division of Vedic society in Kshatriya, Brahmins, Vaisya and Shudra. 50 The Kuru kingdom declined after its defeat by the non-Vedic Salva tribe, and the political center of Vedic culture shifted east, into the Panchala kingdom on the Ganges. 41 Later, the kingdom of Vidha emerged as a political center farther to the east, in what is today southern Nepal and northern Bihar state in India, reaching its prominence under the king Janaka, whose court provided patronage for Brahmin sages and philosophers such as Yajnavalkya and Abdalakaya Unada. Second urbanization. By the 6th century BCE, the political units consolidated into large kingdoms called Mahajanapadas. The process of urbanization had begun in these kingdoms and commerce and travel, even over regions separated by large distances, became easy. 52 Anga, doorstep of modern-day West Bengal, a small kingdom to the east of Magadha, formed the eastern boundary of the Vedic culture. 53 Yadavas expanded towards the south and settled in Mathura. To the south of their kingdom was Vatsa, which was governed from its capital Kausambi. The Narmada River and parts of northwestern Deccan formed the southern limits. 54-55 The newly formed states struggled for supremacy and started displaying imperial ambitions. 56 The end of Vedic India is marked by linguistic, cultural and political changes. The grammar of Pahini marks a final apex in the codification of sutra texts, and at the same time the beginning of classical Sanskrit. 57 The invasion of Bari-Usai of the Indus Valley in the early 6th century BCE marks the beginning of outside influence, continued in the kingdoms of the Indo-Greeks. 58 Meanwhile, within India, the Shramana movements including Jainism and Buddhism challenged the authority and orthodoxy of Vedic scriptures and ritual. 6 Culture society. Vedic society was relatively egalitarian in the sense that a distinct hierarchy of socio-economic classes or castes was absent. 59-60 However, political hierarchy was determined by rank, where Rajan stood at the top and Desi at the bottom. 60 The words Brahmana and Kshatriya occur in various family books of the Rig Veda, but they are not associated with the term Varna. The words Vaisya and Shudra are absent. Verses of the Rig Veda, such as 3.44-45, indicate the absence of strict social hierarchy and the existence of social mobility. 34 Indra, fond of Soma, would you make me the protector of people, or would you make me a king, would you make me a sage who is drunk? Soma, would you impart to me endless wealth? The Vedic household was patriarchal and patrilineal. The institution of marriage was important, and different types of marriages, monogamy, polygyny and polyandry, are mentioned in the Rig Veda. Both women sages and female gods were known to Vedic Aryans. However, kings attributable to female sages are few, and female gods were not as important as male ones. Women could choose their husbands and could remarry if their husbands died or disappeared. 60 While the wife enjoyed a respectable position, she was subordinate to her husband. 61 People consumed milk, milk products, grains, fruits, vegetables and meat. Clothes of cotton, wool and animal skin were worn. 60 Soma and Siri were popular drinks in the Rig Vedic society, of which Soma was sanctified by religion. Flute, bantu, veena, harp, cymbals, and drums were the musical instruments played, and heptatonic scale was used. 61 Dancing, promise, chariot racing, and gambling were other popular pastimes. 60 The emergence of monarchical states in the later Vedic age led to a distancing of the Rajan from the people and the emergence of a Varna hierarchy. The society was divided into four social groups: Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaisyas and Shudras. The later Vedic texts fixed social boundaries, roles, status and ritual purity for each of the groups. The Shatapatha Brahmana associates the Brahmana with purity of parentage, good conduct, glory, teaching or protecting people; Kshatriya with strength, fame, ruling, and warfare; Vaisya with material prosperity and production-related activities such as cattle rearing and agriculture; Shudras with the service of the higher Varnas. The effects of Rajasuya sacrifice depended on the Varna of the sacrificer. Rajasuya endowed Brahmana with luster, Kshatriya with valor, Vaisya with procreative power and Shudra with stability. The hierarchy of the top three Varnas is ambiguous in the later Vedic texts. Panchavamsha Brahmana and verse 13.8.3.11 of the Shatapatha Brahmana place Kshatriya over Brahmana and Vaisya, whereas verse 1.1.4.12 places Brahmana and Vaisya over the Kshatriya and Shudra. The Purusha Sukta visualized the four Varnas as hierarchical, but interrelated parts of an organic whole. 62 Despite the increasing social stratification in the later Vedic times, hymns like Rig Veda by X. 112 suggests some amount of social mobility. I am a reciter of hymns, my father a physician, and my mother grinds corn with stones. We desire to obtain wealth in various actions. 63-64 Household became an important unit in the later Vedic age. The variety of households of the Rig Vedic era gave way to an idealized household which was headed by a Grihapati. The relations between husband and wife, father and son were hierarchically organized, and the women were relegated to subordinate and docile roles. Polygyny was more common than polyandry, and texts like Taittiriya Samhita indicate taboos around menstruating women. Various professions women took to are mentioned in the later Vedic texts. Women tended to cattle, milked cows, carded wool, were weavers, dyers, and corn grinders. Women warriors such as Vishvala, who lost a leg in battle, are mentioned. Two female philosophers are mentioned in the Upanishads. 65 Patrick Olivelle, in his translation of the Upanishads, writes that the fact that these women are introduced without any attempt to justify or to explain how women could be engaged in theological matters suggests the relatively high social and religious position of at least women of some social strata during this period. 66 Political organization and early Vedic Aryans were organized into tribes rather than kingdoms. The chief of a tribe was called a Rajan. The autonomy of the Rajan was restricted by the tribal councils called Sabha and Samhita. The two bodies were, in part, responsible for the governance of the tribe. The Rajan could not accede to the throne without their approval. The distinction between the two bodies is not clear. Arthur Llewellyn Basham, a noted historian and Indologist, theorizes that Sabha was a meeting of great men in the tribe, whereas Samhita was a meeting of all free tribesmen. Some tribes had no hereditary chiefs and were directly governed by the tribal councils. Rajan had a rudimentary court which was attended by courtiers Sabhas and chiefs of septs Gramani. The main responsibility of the Rajan was to protect the tribe. He was aided by several functionaries, including the Purohita chaplain Masenani army chief Duta's envoys and spies. 67 Purohita performed ceremonies and spells for success in war and prosperity in peace. 68 In the later Vedic period, the tribes had consolidated into small kingdoms, which had a capital and a rudimentary administrative system. 69 To aid in governing these new states, the kings and their Brahmin priests arranged Vedic hymns into collections and developed a new set of rituals, the now orthodox Yasrauta rituals, to strengthen the emerging social hierarchy. 41 The Rajan was seen as the custodian of social order and the protector of Rashtra polity. Hereditary kingship started emerging, and competitions like chariot races, cattle raids, and game of dice, which previously decided who was worthy of becoming a king, became nominal. Rituals in this era exalted the status of the king over his people. He was occasionally referred to as Samrat, supreme ruler. Rajan's increasing political power enabled him to gain greater control over the productive resources. The voluntary gift offering bali became compulsory tribute. However, there was no organized system of taxation. Sabha and Samati are still mentioned in later Vedic texts, though, with increasing power of king, their influence declined. 70 By the end of the later Vedic age, different kinds of political systems such as monarchical states, regio-oligarchical states, Gana or Sangha, and tribal principalities had emerged in India. 70 Economy in the Vedic period was sustained by a combination of pastoralism and agriculture. 61 There are references, in the Veda, to leveling of field, seed processing, and storage of grains in large jars. War booty was also a major source of wealth. 60 Economic exchanges were conducted by gift-giving, particularly to kings Bali and priests Dana and barter, using cattle as a unit of currency. While gold is mentioned in some hymns, there is no indication of the use of coins. Metallurgy is not mentioned in the Rig Veda, but the word ayas and instruments made from it such as razors, bangles, axes are mentioned. One verse mentions purification of ayas. Some scholars believe that ayas refers to iron and the words them and karma refer to iron welders. 71 However, philological evidence indicates that ayas in the Rig Veda refers only to copper and bronze, while iron or syama ayas, literally black metal, first is mentioned in the post-Rig Vedic Atharva Veda 241, and therefore the early Vedic period was a Bronze Age culture, whereas the late Vedic period was an Iron Age culture. Citation needed the transition of Vedic society from semi-nomadic life to settled agriculture in the later Vedic age lead to an increase in trade and competition for resources. 72 Agriculture dominated the economic activity along the Ganges Valley during this period. 73 Agricultural operations grew in complexity and usage of iron implements. Krishna ayas or Shyama ayas, literally black metal or dark metal, increased. Crops of wheat, rice, and barley were cultivated. Surplus production helped to support the centralized kingdoms that were emerging at this time. 41 New crafts and occupations such as carpentry, leatherwork, tanning, pottery, astrology, jewelry, dyeing, and winemaking arose. 74 Apart from copper, bronze, and gold, later Vedic texts also mention tin, lead, and silver. 75 Panics in some hymns refers to merchants, in others to stingy people who hid their wealth and did not perform Vedic sacrifices. Some scholars suggest that panics were Semitic traders, but the evidence for this is slim. 39 Professions of warriors, priests, cattle raiders, farmers, hunters, barbers, vintners, and crafts of chariot making, cart making, carpentry, metal working, tanning, making of bows, sewing, weaving, making mats of grass and reed are mentioned in the hymns of Rig Veda. Some of these might have needed full-time specialists. 71 There are references to boats and oceans. The Book X of the Rig Veda refers to both eastern and western oceans. Individual property ownership did not exist, and clans as a whole enjoyed rights over lands and herds. Enslavement dasi in the course of war or as a result of non-payment of debt is mentioned. However, slaves worked in households rather than production-related activities. 60 Religion. The Vedic forms of belief are one of the precursors to modern Hinduism. 76 Texts considered to date to the Vedic period are mainly the four Vedas, but the Brahmanas, Aranyakas, and the older Upanishads as well as the oldest Shrauta Sutras are also considered to be Vedic. The Vedas record the liturgy connected with the rituals and sacrifices performed by the 16 or 17 Shrauta priests and the Purohitas. Citation needed the rishis, the composers of the hymns of the Rig Veda, were considered inspired poets and seers in post-Vedic times, understood as hearers of an eternally existing Veda. Yasrauta means what is heard. The mode of worship was the performance of sacrifices yajna, which included the chanting of Rigvedic verses, Vedic chants, singing of sermons and mumbling of sacrificial mantras. Yajna involved sacrifice and sublimation of the Herbanasmadri herbal preparations in the fire, accompanied by the chanting of the Vedic mantras. The sublime meaning of the word yajna is derived from the Sanskrit verb y, which has a threefold meaning of worship of deities: Devakujana, unity, Satagata Korana, and charity dana. 77 An essential element was the sacrificial fire, the divine Agni, into which oblations were poured, as everything offered into the fire was believed to reach God. People prayed for abundance of rain, cattle, sons, long life and gaining heaven. Vedic people believe in the transmigration of the soul, and the peepal tree and cow were sanctified by the time of the Atharvaveda. 78 Many of the concepts of Indian philosophy espoused later, like karma etc., trace their root to the Vedas. 79 The main deities of the Vedic pantheon were Indra, Agni the sacrificial fire, and Soma, and some deities of social order such as Mitra, Varuna, Paraman, Bhaga and Hamsa. Further nature deities such as Surya the sun, Vayu the wine, Prithvi the earth. Goddesses included Ushas the dawn, Prithvi and Aditi the mother of the Aditya gods, or sometimes the cow. Rivers, especially Saraswati, were also considered goddesses. Deities were not viewed as all-powerful. The relationship between humans and the deity was one of transaction, with Agni the sacrificial fire taking a role of messenger between the two. Strong traces of a common Indo-Iranian religion remain visible, especially in the Somo cult and the fire worship, both of which are preserved in Zoroastrianism. Ethics in the Vedas are based on the concepts of Satya and Rta. Satya is the principle of integration rooted in the absolute. 80 Whereas Ta is the expression of Satya, which regulates and coordinates the operation of the universe and everything within it. 81 Conformity with Ta would enable progress, whereas its violation would lead to punishment. Vedic religion evolved into the Hindu paths of Yoga and Vedanta, the religious path considering itself the essence of the Vedas, interpreting the Vedic pantheon as a unitary view of the universe, with God Brahman seen as immanent and transcendent in the forms of Isvara and Brahman. These post-Vedic systems of thought, along with later texts like Upanishads, epics namely Gita of Mahabharata, have been fully preserved and form the basis of modern Hinduism. The ritualistic traditions of Vedic religion are preserved in the conservative Srauta tradition. Literature. The reconstruction of the history of Vedic India is based on text internal details, but can be correlated to relevant archaeological details. Linguistically, the Vedic texts could be classified in 5 chronological strata: 1. Rigvedic text. The Rigveda is by far the most archaic of the Vedic texts preserved, and it retains many common Indo-Iranian elements, both in language and in content, that are not present in any other Vedic texts. Its time span likely corresponds to the late Harappan culture, Gandhara grave culture and ochre-colored pottery culture. 2. Mantra language texts. This period includes both the mantra and prose language of the Atharvaveda Papalaga and Shaunakya, the Rigveda Kalani, the Samaveda Samhita containing some 75 mantras not in the Rigveda, and the mantras of the Yajurveda. Many of these texts are largely derived from the Rigveda, but have undergone certain changes, both by linguistic change and by reinterpretation. Conspicuous changes include change of Visvayat all by Sarva, and the spread of the Kuru, verbal stem for Rigvedic Kayano. This is the time of the early Iron Age in northwestern India, corresponding to the black and red ware BRW and painted grey ware PGW cultures, and the early Kuru kingdom, dating from c. the 12th to 11th century BCE. 3. Samhita prose texts. This period marks the beginning of the collection and codification of a Vedic canon. An important linguistic change is the complete loss of the injunctive. The Brahmana heart commentary on mantras and ritual of the Black Yajurveda MS.A.S.T.S. belongs to this period. Archaeologically, the painted grey ware PGW culture from c. 1000 or 900 BCE corresponds to the Kuru kingdom and the subsequent eastward shift of the political center from the Kurus to the Panchalas on the Ganges. 4. Brahmana prose texts. The Brahmanas proper of the 4 Vedas belong to this period, as well as the Aranyakas, the oldest of the Upanishads Bau, Chu, Chayubi, and the oldest Shrauta Sutras BSS, Vads. In the east, Vidha and Bihar and Nepal is established as the 3rd main political center of the Vedic period. 5. Sutra language texts. This is the last stratum of Vedic Sanskrit leading up to c. 500 BCE, comprising the bulk of the Sruta and Grachya Sutras, and some Upanishads e.g. Katha, Maitra,